I collected about, I don't know, 15 or so topics we'd like to discuss. And, feedback on the process would be wonderful. If you guys want to prioritize these topics, or if you want to change the order, or if there's something we don't care about anymore, let me know. But one of the ways we can approach this workshop this afternoon is to go down a list of topics and then address them. And in many cases, I want you guys to share your experiences, or especially those guys with who implemented big systems, your experiences that that we might learn from. So maybe we'll break this up into, we'll do this set of topics before the break this afternoon, and then this other set of topics after the break, or something of that nature. And then at the end we'll just say whatever else, and we can address whatever we have left over. Now, I'm pretty flexible about this evening, and I don't know if you guys have scheduled things already. I don't know if there's anything at the conference set this afternoon. Drinking. The bar is right downstairs, so we're pretty close to the bar. But I'm very flexible in that, and we can do hang out as long as you guys would like to hang out. So we'll leave that door open as the time comes. And just as a teaser to keep you around, maybe, I've got some things I'd like to show if I can get working on my VirtualBox that you might find interesting related to ZFS. So if it's okay, if you guys would just want to go down this list in order and talk about the topics. Sure. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay. Probably should have set these slides ahead of time. Okay, ZFS boot. The biggest difficult thing in getting ZFS support for root has been getting all of the installation, patching, and upgrade stuff to deal with it. That's taking an unusually long amount of time. We find things like packages I think it was the patch command didn't handle with having a root file system bigger than a terabyte. And the only place you're going to find those kinds of problems is by trying it. So we have run into some of those kinds of issues. The most integrated place where this occurs is in OpenSolaris 2008-05. And if you're running Solaris Express Community Edition, SXCE, which looks more like Solaris 10, then you can install ZFS root, and in Solaris 10 you can install ZFS root as well, but not in the GUI installer. So if I can explain why that is, I don't have a good excuse, but I would say that there's not a lot of people working on the GUI installer for Solaris 10. I don't know if the number is 0, but
it's approaching 0.
It's not a lot of people, shall we say. And so when they integrated the ZFS boot support for Solaris 10 and with that installer, because OpenSolaris has a totally new installer. So with the old installer in Solaris 10, they didn't want to waste a lot of time working on it. So it's there in the text version of the installer. So when it boots up, right, then you get this, do you want to boot, or do you want to boot into the GUI installer, do you want to boot into the text installer with the display, and do you want just the ASCII text installer? And you'll want to select the text installer. Alternatively, a lot of people use Jumpstart for installing systems, and it is integrated into Jumpstart. So in Jumpstart, you can say, make root file system, ZFS, and you can even mirror it in Jumpstart, which for anybody who's running a large site, I'm pretty sure you're going to be using Jumpstart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so in the docs, you'll find all the instructions for the keywords that you can use in Jumpstart for ZFS root profiles. So all that's there, and like I said, it'll do mirroring for you. It'll do all the right things. And so I would recommend it, especially if you're going to do mirrored root. Go ahead and do the Jumpstart.
Do you know if Jet handles the new stuff?
Does Jet handle the new stuff?
ZFS root
I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know Mike Ramshand's been mumbling lately, so he's the guy who writes a lot of that. Yes?
Boot from SAN with multipathing.
Boot from SAN with multipath.
A year or two back, one of my colleagues basically couldn't figure out how to get multipathing work, so we ruled out boot from SAN.
That is an excellent question. Cindy, do you know? No? All right. Mark that down. We'll figure it out. Because, yeah, if you have multipathing, you'd rather that work, right? That'd be a good thing.
Especially when the SAN team goes and shuts down the switch for a firmware upgrade.
Yes.
That never happens.
Oh, no.
SAN teams.
And they always tell you before they do it.
After forget to turn them back on.
During business hours of the day,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we love our SAN guys. Okay, so yeah, by far the easiest way to do it, I think, is Jumpstart Solaris 10, Solaris Express Community Edition as well. In Open Solaris 2008-11, the replacement for Jumpstart first appears. Okay, so those of you who want to be on the leading edge of this, right? There is the IPS replacement for Jumpstart appears and should also handle the same sort of thing. Cindy, am I wrong? It does the same. What does ZFS root? We know. I don't know if you can set mirroring.
You said that was in Solaris 11?
I'm not sure how far they got on the auto install stuff
Yeah.
for 11.
Okay.
Um,
I know it's coming.
Right.
Hmm.
No, I think actually it's for April.
I think it's going to slide to April. Okay. So it's probably going to appear in the interim builds
Right.
somewhere
I
along the
think
line.
January they'll have something that's testable.
Okay. All right. So it looks like at least for the immediate time forward, I think we won't have Jumpstart yet for 2008, Open Solaris 2008. But it's definitely in the plans because it's a very popular service. So popular, we even wrote a book on it. Chuck's not here to laugh about that. Chuck was the director in charge of the team writing the book on Jumpstart. So that was part of my team a few years ago. We have a question.
Yeah, about the ZFS on the root on Spark. Is that available also?
Yes, so ZFS root for Spark is also available. Do we have a good slide, Cindy, on that well basically shows Lori's?
Yeah, Laura's slides are up.
Yeah.
If you go to community ZFS/boot, she has slides up there.
Yeah. So there's a slide set and there's a couple of presentations that Deirdre
Yeah, there's a video that was filmed in
videos.
October.
Right, but if you start at the boot page, that takes you to the boot FAQ, it takes you to the docs, it takes you to Laura's slides, so it's a good place to start.
Yeah, so she goes through the process of how you get from master boot record, to the bootloader, and so on down the list. And the reason I say this is kind of important, if I understand all the nuances, that in the Spark side of the world, we're also doing the same sort of thing. Right? So we have, instead of like a 2-stage boot in Spark, now it's going to a 3-stage boot kind of a thing. I'm not all that terribly familiar with the Spark side though, because I haven't run my Spark in a while. Has anybody done the ZFS root install on Spark here? Yeah, we got a couple back there. Is it pretty much the same?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the same as x86 in all practical purposes. And putting on my troubleshooting hat, that leads to an opportunity for problems. In that we have this boot archive, and you want to try to make sure that you're in sync with your root archive at all times. Now, if you do the normal stuff, right, I use the NID6 and that sort of thing, then everything should be fine, should be taken care of for you. There are cases where it won't be, and some of the error messages might be a little cryptic, and it's something that as more people are experimenting and running into problems, we're seeing more error messages. We're trying to put together some stuff for the troubleshooting page to help make that a little bit easier to riddle through. But those of you who've run grub systems for a while, you'll recognize a lot of the issues. A lot of those grub-like issues are new to Spark people, just because we haven't had that in the past. So any other questions or experiences or comments on boot and Spark? Yes.
In the November build of Open Solaris, in the May version that I built, it supported ZFS, but it didn't seem to support mirroring, so I kind of hacked it. Is it going to support real mirroring? Because I noticed when I did the Solaris 10 that you recommended for this last week, that it did support it.
Yeah. So mirroring root during the install. I'm not sure.
The Solaris 10U6 version supports mirroring at installation. So if you select 2 disks, it will mirror those from the initial install.
Okay.
I just installed the November release, and I only have 1 disk, so I don't think it's there yet. I mean, you can do a Z-pool attach, after the install.
Right. The problem with that is that doesn't get the boot box
Yeah,
built.
that's true.
So the way that I did it is I installed it on one, and then I installed it on the other, and then just mirrored it after the fact.
That's a good question, and I am going to get an answer.
Yeah, let's get that answer. Because the other thing I'd like to point out that is very important is it's real easy in ZFS to attach a mirror. In fact, that's how you do it. You say zpool attach disk drive, or zpool attach, pool disk drive, and it will add a mirror for you. But it won't automatically pull over boot records or grub kind of thing. And so there's an additional step to go through to do the install grub, and whatever other steps you might need to do in your BIOS for the search paths and all that other sort of stuff. The key thing is that in the ZFS administration guide, there's a section on mirroring roots, and has the procedure for your release and Spark versus x86. And so what I've been doing lately is just sort of de facto. Oh, you want to mirror root? Okay, read this section in the manual. Okay, because it has, it's like a page or 2 on each, so it's not a whole lot of verbosity, but it does go through the steps to make sure that you do the right thing. Again, when we do jump start with it, or in the installer that supports mirrored root, all that magic should be done behind the scenes for you. Again, trying to make it easy. Yeah, question?
Is there a swap and dump must be separate devices for ZFS root?
Yeah.
So what's the recommendation for dump device?
Okay, so swap and dump. When we dump, there's a little secret about how dumps occur in Solaris, and it's not like it's a hidden secret, but basically when the kernel panics and it dumps, then it goes into a mode where all locks are granted. Okay, now, so if we got a parallel multi-threaded file system, or a multi-threaded kernel, and basically in panic mode, if anybody asks for a lock, they get it. Okay, so basically that's so we don't deadlock on panic. And so what happens then is that we're going to be blasting out data right to a device. So we're dumping to a device, there's no locks in the way. And in the past, that's tripped us up on things like SVM and Veritas, where you had dump mirrored or something like that. But if there's any locking that needs to go on to make sure things work properly, we're ignoring the locks, we're just blasting away. So what we do in ZFS for the dump device is it's pre-allocated space, and basically, so we don't have to lock waiting on allocation because, like I said, locks are granted. So basically, it's pre-allocated space just out there for you to blast a dump to. Okay, so but that's different than what we want to do in a swap. In a swap environment, we'd rather dynamically allocate those blocks. So that's part of the reason why we separated out dump from swap. In other words, swap devices don't make good dump devices anymore, but we need this special thing for dump. So we had a bit of an argument then. Okay, well, how big should dump be? Or conversely, how big should swap be? And so we fretted and argued about it, and who won? So we do a default sizing of those that sort of makes sense. So we try not to get swap bigger than 2 gigabytes, for example. And then dump, I think, is half a gig or...
Right, dump sounds dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so dump changes based on how big the machine is. And then swap, we cap at 2 gigs, I think, something like that. Whatever it is that comes out of the box by default, of course, you can always change. And you can change swap on the fly pretty easy. Well, dump on the fly for that matter as well. But we wanted to avoid the issue that you currently have with UFS, and that we need, typically, the installer will assign a swap slice, right? And then that swap slice will be used for dump as well. In the storage pool environment, we'd rather have one whole disk and then be able to assign accordingly. So that is a little bit of a different change. And it does, as a system administration, give you the ability to go back in later and change dynamically the size of those devices. Or in the case of swap, you can even add a second swap device, or a second swap ZVol, or what have you.
So if I had a new box with 2 disks, I should how about an extra slice of dump?
You shouldn't have to have an extra slice for dump. So we'll actually, in ZFS root, we'll actually create a volume, a ZVol, for dump.
Oh.
That's pre-allocated.
Okay, it's a separate device, I think.
Yeah, hope I didn't lose you there.
So I see we're separate devices. I think it's separate disks.
Oh, right. Yeah, we have a bit of a terminology with I'm afraid. So a ZVol, sometimes we refer to as a device because it provides a device-like block interface to that. So the net is that in the old days, we would have to guess at install time what your partition layout should be. Right now, you'll notice that a large variety of other OSs, and notably Windows and Mac OS X, don't have this restriction. Right? So it goes back to, is this one of those restrictions we can live without? Can we be more dynamic in our assignment of space for dump and swap? And so we're getting one step closer to that. We don't quite have the dynamic swap growth capabilities that like OS X has yet, but the underpinnings are there, someone just needs to write a daemon that does that. Now, having said that, if you have to swap, your performance is going to stink. So it really doesn't matter how big your swap device is. If you have to swap, your performance is going to stink. And the way to make your performance not stink is to not swap, which means you have enough memory to do what you need to do. So we often get a question about on the performance side is like, well, should I stripe swap or what have you, or should I have more than one swap device, or should I put swap on non-volatile rate, cache device like a RAID array? And the answer is, if you have to swap, your life is miserable. Right, swap. And to give you an idea, there's about 4 orders of magnitude in latency between a main memory access and a disk access. Okay, so 3 or 4 orders of magnitude. And if I make my swap twice as fast, I'm still 3 or 4 orders of magnitude off.
Well, okay, but we're mentioning about swap, I'm really asking about /TMP, right?
/TMP.
By default, that's good on swap.
Yeah, /TMP by default will live in virtual memory. Yes, absolutely. Whether you actually use the swap device depends on how much memory you have. Right. So again, you get into the situation of, does it work really like a RAM disk? Well, hopefully, it always works like a RAM disk. But if it doesn't, that means you're low on memory, which means you're swapping, which means...
Yeah, I've had to chastise application users for putting stuff in /TMP that didn't belong there. They're like, hey, my files disappeared. Yeah. That's what it's all about, yeah.
Okay. So any other questions on swap dump suggestions? We had this go around about the sizing of all this stuff, and it got pretty heated there, I think, on install discuss one day. But I think we came up with something that's out of the box, fairly reasonable to deal with, and then again, it's easy to adjust later. Unlike the old UFS days where I had to reslice the disk, with ZFS I don't have to reslice the disk. I can change the size of my swap volume without having to adjust the slice at all. So, Cindy?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. If you are going to be using ZFS boot and install, please make sure that you read everything. I write the documentation, but I generally don't read it because I think, everybody should think it's easy enough that you don't have to read the documentation. But in this case, you think you may know how live upgrade works because you've been using it for a long time, but it's different. So just make sure you read everything. And if you're going to be using ZFS and zones, ZFS root with zones, there's some limitations on your configurations in terms of whether they're patchable, okay, and upgradable. So just go to the ZFS boot page and just make sure you read everything. I also have a troubleshooting wiki on SolarisInternals.com, which also identifies some things that you might run into. So just be prepared, and it'll be fun.
Maybe you're living in interesting times.
Yeah.
And it's basically the same.
One other comment, going back to our Open Solaris 10 kind of a thought. Live upgrade is a Solaris 10-ish kind of thing, and an SXCE-ish kind of thing. In the new image packaging system, it's not live upgrade anymore. Is it BEADM? BEADM, Boot Environment Administration, is the replacement. It's a lot smarter since we know we're on ZFS for root. So we're able to cut out a lot of the corruptiness that was live upgrade.
Will that work if you're migrating from UFS to ZFS? I mean, is that's only from ZFS to ZFS?
No, there is a process to live upgrade from UFS to ZFS.
Well, I mean, for the newer, the BEADM.
The BEADM is ZFS only.
Okay. Yeah, I actually ran into one of the issues she was talking about, where I tried to perform a live upgrade on an x86 box that hung on the mounts. And I just actually found out on Solaris internals today that apparently for file systems that have bar broken out into a separate file system, it can cause the mounts to hang. So I'm anxious to get back and try it out now.
Excellent question. All right, so how many people put var in a separate file system? Yeah? A few folks?
Not by choice.
Yeah, not by choice. So, why did that ever happen? I have a strong opinion on this, and I think it's a silly idea. But it is something that you'll find in some document, particularly older documentation. You'll find a lot of people did that. And in fact, it was so popular that I think in the Solaris 10 upgrade or installation now, it has, click here if you want var to be a separate file system.
It does.
Now, traditionally, that has caused us all sorts of bugs. And if you go back and look in the bug database, you'll find a couple of bugs that related to what happens if var is separate and some software developer didn't make that assumption. And so occasionally things would come up and bug on that. My opinion is that if you need a separate policy, okay, back to ZFS parameters, if you need a separate policy that you want to apply to a file system, that's when you should do it. And so traditionally people say, well, a user can fill up var temp and cause a denial of service. Okay, that would be a reasonable reason to have a policy. Having said that, a full root file system does not cause Solaris to crash, contrary to popular belief.
We've seen that happen too.
And so we've actually ran an experiment back when we were doing the Jumpstart book, because we were arguing about this, and we were trying to come to some sort of recommendation to use. And so we actually ran our department website with a job that kept root full. It's actually hard. You have to write a while, forever, fill up the file system.
Users have that too.
Kind of thing, yeah. And so we ran that way for 6 months, and after 6 months we finally decided, we're kind of bored of running this experiment, and I think we proved our point, and so on. Having said that, there are 2 bugs in Open Solaris that if your root file system is full, some things may not work. Okay? And Cindy, if you'll make a note, since I filed those 2 bugs, I'll dig them up and send you guys the bug IDs for those, because some of the services that start up assume that they could write to etc and that write will complete correctly, which is not the case if the file system is full, right? So so there is 1 or 2 bugs that are associated with that may trip you. So basically then the takeaway is that if you have a full root file system and you boot the system up and some of the services aren't going, then that could be a reason why, if you check the file system is full, root file system is full. So that's one of those gotchas. Now, it was a bigger problem back when we had 40 meg disks than it is today with big disks. But that's something to keep an eyeball out for. Any other comments, questions? Boot? Do we have any more questions on Open Solaris versus Solaris 10? Maybe I can help. Yes?
You were showing a timeline earlier on about what's happening with Open Solaris and the releases. Are you able to comment on what the implication for the next release of your supported enterprise for Solaris would be? Is there going to be a Solaris 11, or is it just going to be a slice or point in time off an Open Solaris?
So the question is there going to be a Solaris 11, or what are we going to call it? And I don't live in marketing, or marketing space or the world they live in. I don't smoke the same dope.
Wasn't your idea?
They'll probably call it Java. No, I don't think it's really been decided when they're going to, or what they will decide to call Solaris 11.
Well, some of what year would you be expecting to move from things like Jumpstart to be AVM or those kind of things? If it just come out of Open Solaris and be in whatever the next enterprise Solaris will be.
Yeah,
Is that what the rough idea is?
So the rough idea, as I understand it, is that, and Solaris 10 is on a long-term support, 8-10 year kind of a timeline for contractual support. And then at some point there will be an Open Solaris release, which will have the new stuff that also is blessed with a long-term support contract. Because the bits don't disappear over time, but it's really a matter of, all right, what do the contractual support agreements want?
It's how we get at the bells and whistles support fashion.
Yeah, and it gets into if I call, are they going to hang up on me or whatnot? So from a development perspective, that's sort of beyond the things we tend to like to worry about. So I hope that wasn't too mushy, but that's kind of my perspective. And to be honest, we've got some work to do to implement features that aren't quite there in the whole Open Solaris installation, upgrade, IPS thing, like the auto install, jumpstart replacement sort of thing has to really be there and be solid before we're ready to make that leap, or before we can expect you guys to do that sort of thing. Because I guarantee you're not going to go off install 1,000 machines at the fan line yet. That's a non-starter. Yes?
I'm sitting in what I think might be a strange position. I work at a university where I'm free to buy any kind of hardware I want. And, there's like no mandate saying you have to buy this, you have to buy that. Should I be buying, just your recommendation, but, or people around the room, should I be buying x86 boxes or Spark boxes? I mean, I like the Sun hardware, but I don't plan on moving away from that.
That's great answer.
Yeah.
Mine has Sun on the front logo.
Sun Blade 6000.
That was his question. It was x86 versus Spark, I think.
Yeah,
was his question.
x86 versus Spark. I mean,
What are you currently
Yeah,
doing?
it depends on your workload.
I've been buying, Spark boxes for the last 10, 12 years. And the last time I ordered boxes, I bought 2 of each.
We've debated that a lot, and for the most part, we've ruled out buying x86 boxes because we've got a couple thousand Spark boxes, and if we start deploying x86 boxes, that means we have to maintain 2 to 3 years of build releases both for Spark and for x86, and we've got like a dozen people, and it's just
I recently
too
lost 80% of my assistant wing staff, so I've been building with Red Hat skilled people. So, but I still have, I don't know, 15, 20 Spark boxes that are aging and need to be replaced.
Maybe virtualization has a lot to do with it. If you're going to go heavy into virtualization, and the x86 component will be more attractive. If you're going to have to also run Linux images and that kind of stuff.
It also depends on your workloads, because it's not just Spark versus x86 anymore, it's which kind of Spark. The Niagara and the Spark T, those are suited for some workloads, but definitely not for others. So it really depends on the software you're running. I mean, it's not just, there's really 3 choices there, because the Niagara-based boxes are smaller and cheaper, and they could be price-wise, but they're not going to do some of the stuff that you need the big old school Sparks.
And if you have legacy binaries, they're Spark binaries, obviously you can't run those in x86.
Which I have none.
You've got none.
Well, do you like OBP better, or do you like Grub better?
There's a lot of different questions you're going to have to ask yourself, and it's in your personal environment. System administration, expertise, where are you going to get that? There's manpower costs. X86 boxes can run Solaris, but they can run Red Hat too.
Windows.
Energy is another one though. I mean, if you want really energy efficient, the Spark boxes are pretty energy efficient. If you got racks and racks, but it doesn't sound like you do. So, but, you know, you gotta ask your question. And the question is, what is important in your environment? Make a selection off of that. I think as far as Solaris is concerned, I like Spark because I'm a Sun employee.
This message brought to you by.
Yes. I was honest up front, and you know.
We've been doing the same question ourselves. The big issue for us has been that, at least in the last 6 months or a year, Sun seems to be kind of exiting the low end, like 2U type boxes. They do now have the M3000 which can operate. But for a while there was no, like, we have a bunch of like V240s with our still working one time. And for a while there was just nothing really to replace that once you got rid of the 245s and that.
Right.
So we've been buying some of the x86 boxes we're running Linux on. However, now with some of the new things like Solaris, like ZFS and that, you know, Solaris is becoming a little more attractive again. So now we're looking at x86 Solaris as well. And we put up some test boxes and it's been working pretty well. So I see us supporting both of them. We'll probably have to keep Spark for something like Oracle, which don't really support x86 Solaris quite yet, or at least not some versions of it.
Yeah. Third-party software. Sometimes drives that much to the chagrin of some. Adobe AcroRead. We have a Spark version. Spark is source code compatible with x86 Solaris, but we don't have an Adobe AcroRead for x86 Solaris. However, it's 9, right? Adobe Acrobat 9?
Yeah.
Next year is supposed to come out in a Solaris x86 release as well. So, and then Oracle is another example where some versions of Oracle, especially the 64-bit ones, are available readily in Spark Solaris, but not in Solaris x86.
Most of their ERP, sorry, most of the Linux libraries supposed to run on Solaris.
I don't want to get into a Brenzy discussion too much, but it is feasible that something could work.
Variable kernel version.
It's the 2.4 kernel version.
But Oracle's ERP, e-business suite, is Spark only, just to take a big example.
Yeah, Oracle e-business suite is Spark only. Kind of the nice, well, I'll say this as a nice thing, but it really isn't, is that Oracle's been jacking their prices. So, for our perspective, that's interesting. It's opening the doors for a lot of other things. But again, you know, it really doesn't solve the ISV problem in general because there's a lot of, especially CAD/CAM, ECAD, database kinds of things that are, in fact, supported on one and or not the other in some form or fashion. Most of the free and open source software, you know, ports either automatically or pretty easily either way. So it's really the non-open source stuff that gets to be more of a problem. But any other thoughts on the topic? Okay, what do we have next? We talked a little bit as we went along about ZFS, SMB, NFS, and iSCSI. A lot of the changes, again, this is a Solaris 10 to Open Solaris kind of a change. A lot of the making these services, you know, front and center, you know, full kernel level, implementations has occurred in the Open Solaris side. In particular, the ZFS stuff. We mentioned earlier that if you're running Solaris 10, you're going to be running Samba. If you're running Open Solaris, you have a choice of either Samba or the in-kernel ZFS application. When you do a share of ZFS and ZFS, it will do the in-kernel ZFS implementation. NFS is there. A lot of, I mean, do you guys use NFS a lot? Yeah, a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It tends to work for the most part. I will caution that we have sometimes discussions will come up from somebody who's on ZFS using NFS that are either NFS interoperability issues or specific workloads and specific hardware configurations that as a best practice performance-wise you may want to avoid. So my caution there is that just because there's a share NFS command or parameter in ZFS, we didn't re-implement NFS. It's still the same NFS code that we've always had. We just give you a system admin interface to that. And so sometimes, if you have an NFS question, it's better to ask it on NFS Discuss than ZFS Discuss, even though you may be using ZFS as a backend file store. So, that's sort of my editorial comment. Ask the right question in the right form, you have a much better chance of getting a prompt and useful answer. So we can do that. iSCSI has become increasingly popular, particularly in the Windows world. And we're trying to support that seamlessly. I did mention earlier about Comstar, where we replaced the back end there in newer versions of Open Solaris of iSCSI. There's a lot less, my impression is that there's a lot smaller body of understanding of iSCSI than we have in NFS. And if for no other reason than NFS has been around for 23 years, right? So we have 23 years worth of NFS experience in the community, and it's really only been a couple of years that iSCSI's been out in any sort of a volume play. So there's still some stuff to be worked on in iSCSI, and the performance guys are looking at some of this stuff as well. But in general, it seems to work. Okay. So if you have any other thoughts or comments, or
I have what is a potentially really stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Since you can have raw partitions, raw devices, or even files as something that goes into your storage pool, what about iSCSI on a 10 gigabit as part of your component for your Z pool or storage pool?
Oh, okay. So what you're saying then, Chuck, is not only can I serve iSCSI, but I can also be an iSCSI client. Right.
I'm thinking more in terms of, let's say I have a CD0 and CD1, put those together into a Z pool. What if CD0 and CD1 happen to be iSCSI targets?
Yes. Okay. So let me explain to you an example of what we're doing in Sun today. We have this sort of a mantra about eating your own dog food, and makes for interesting times. We have a server up in the Bay Area called Jurassic, and although we have been transitioning from an old Jurassic to a new Jurassic, many of the software developers' home directories are on this machine called Jurassic, and Jurassic is upgraded every other Thursday to the latest build of Nevada, right? And so the idea then is if we have a problem in a Nevada build, we're going to find it on Jurassic and we're going to impact the developers first. Right. And in fact, it's proven to be an excellent driver of quality. Because if I put back the code into the kernel that caused Jurassic to panic, I did that once. Or actually, the team I was on did that. I'll blame the other guys. Then you get a call immediately that says something to the effect of, your code panicked Jurassic. There's a target on your back now. We're going to hunt you down. And so we get those things worked out fairly quickly in Jurassic. Now, somewhere in the past year or two, Jurassic's file system is mirrored, and one side of the mirror is iSCSI to a thumper. Okay, so not only do we do Jurassic as part of a, we're not running this on kind of old hardware, running old stuff. We're actually running now Thumper with the ZFS, exporting iSCSI targets to Jurassic, which is using that as one half of the mirror for a ZFS file system. That's the home directories for the developers. Okay, so the last I checked, that's how it was configured. They probably changed it again, but that's the whole idea, is that, okay, ZFS is agnostic about the device. So as long as you give me a block device, I'm going to use it. And if that block device is a SCSI target somewhere, an iSCSI target, then we'll use it. For the most part, it works. The performance guys will wiggle around whether it works well or not in their eyes. Having said that, iSCSI patches and latest updates are important, especially until even as we get ComStar rolled out to replace the existing iSCSI target. The iSCSI client stuff seems to be a little bit more stable in that regard. Guys?
We run quite a bit of iSCSI, mostly related to zones. It works really good that way. You can have a generic host, your hardware is generic, you can have stacked machines. And then we mirror with ZFS two iSCSI targets from different hardware, usually one from a thumper and one from a right now. And then if that physical application server goes, we can put the zone on the other machine. The performance is okay. And the scrubbing the ZFS pool can take some time, especially for applications we're running. And there are bugs if you're running older Solaris versions. You have to learn which commands you should not run. But it works.
What's your definition of upgrade performance?
Well, we're running MySQL databases across some of them, and our DPA seems reasonably happy. Although when we give a real draw, it seems much happier. But we have to major. Running lots of web, Apache, Tomcat, databases, other things like that.
How big are the databases?
Sorry?
How big are the databases?
Not very big. That's not what's in the database.
Yeah, because if you're running on that, that's because of that.
Are you using 1 gig databases?
Aggregated.
Quad aggregated.
Have you tried trunking multiple databases?
Well, yeah.
There's actually a lot of interesting wrinkles, I think, going into the iSCSI thing and networks. I don't think we've seen quite the kind of workload stressing networks in the past until we start getting a bunch of iSCSI clients. It's been pretty fascinating. But we can throw hardware at networks, so yes.
With the clustering sort of technologies and sort of pushing
using ZFS across multiple servers. And it's something we were on the cusp of doing is scale-out file systems on GPFS. Is that, and the presentation layer that you're talking about there, is that space that you can see ZFS moving into or occupying at some point?
Not really. In fact, I think I have a bullet on the next slide for clusters. We talk a little bit about clustering techniques. The party line, as I know right now, is we've got Luster running above the DNU for the storage side of that. And then a lot of efforts being put into parallel NFS, or PNFS, sometimes you'll hear it called, or NFS version 4.1. You'll also hear it called, which decouples at the NFS protocol level, decouples where your server is, and also manages some redundancy as well, or allows you to source from multiple servers the same file system and that sort of thing. As far as what's going to be in ZFS proper, I don't know of any plans to make it into a distributed file system. Like I said, they'll leverage the DNU level, but as far as when we talk about ZFS, it's the ZPL, right, the POSIX layer interface. It's going to stay largely single node oriented. And then, are you guys concerned at all about HA clusters or high availability services?
Definitely.
Yeah. So, when I get to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what HA cluster services are looking like today.
Can we get rid of them and still have availability?
We can get rid of some cluster.
Maybe.
Or Verifone. I don't want to do any clustering, but I have something that has to be up 5 nines.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that next page. Performance. Does anybody have any performance issues? Always.
Yeah. Everything is a performance issue.
Everything is a performance issue.
The answer always seems to be it depends on the workload.
It all depends.
All depends.
They all come from Oracle.
Oracle performance in particular. Anything else we want to get on the table?
We wanted to try out ZFS, and we had some SAM zones that we connected for testing, and then we took them off, and we forgot to take away the pool that were connected to them, and the server crashed. Is that normal behavior?
Depends on which release. You're on Solaris 10?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Until Solaris 10 update 6, that's what we have. Let me spend a few minutes on that. It's not really on my bullet items, I don't think, but the reliability side of it. Part of what we've been able to do in ZFS, since it arrived at the same time in concept, though not necessarily implementation, as the Solaris fault management architecture, is we've been able to take a lot of the fault management that would have previously gone into UFS or volume managers and split off some of the diagnosis functions into fault management agents for the rest of the system. And that actually allows us to do some interesting things. For example, if a disk is diagnosed by any service as failing or failed, then all services using that disk, in this case the ZFS, can be notified, and then it will do the right thing. Okay, so that is one of the things that having fault management architecture allows us to do. So similarly, if we have a dynamic reconfiguration event, so I'm disconnecting the HBA that goes to that disk, then at the same time I can use the infrastructure assisted events and stuff to get back to tell ZFS to, okay, this is not a failure, we're actually intending to do this, and therefore begin to act appropriately. So those kind of things exist as a benefit of having FMA. The downside to that is that all the FMA agents did not arrive as quickly as we would have liked, and in particular the ones dealing with IO, what we call IO retirement and IO transport. Okay, so there's two modules that arrive in Solaris 10 Update 6 for IO transport and IO retirement that are the key piece to get back to ZFS to tell it what to do in the case of this disappearing. Now, where it impacts you is not on reads, but on writes. So prior, in Solaris 10 Update 5 and before, if a write fails in ZFS, then it will panic the machine. Okay, so it says, I tried to write something, the write failed, I'm going to protect the integrity of the on-disk format and will panic the machine. That's rather that's a big hammer to take onto the problem. And one of the things where we see this most is in a SAN environment, right? Where, especially like our friends that turn off the SAN switches during the day. So maybe there's a transient error on the SAN that, if I waited and did a retry later on, that would work. But if it may bubble back to Solaris, the older releases, as an EIO, and therefore ZFS would panic and you'd be out of there, even though it was a transient condition on the SAN. So in Update 6, that's fixed. And by default, out of the box, it will also be fixed. Now, what do I mean by that? So now in the Z pool, there's a fail mode property. So one of the things I can set is the fail mode. And there's 3 fail modes possible. I have a fail mode that says panic, which is our old behavior, which is the write failed, I panic. There's a Z mode fail property that says continue, which says, this IO didn't finish, but I'm going to try my best to carry on. And if someone asks for a read of the block, then I'll just return EIO to the application. Then there's the default one, and the default one says wait. So basically it will patiently wait forever for that to happen, for the IO to complete. Okay. So as a system administration perspective on this, panic is a big hammer. You probably don't want to use it by default. So then your 2 choices are, do I continue or wait patiently forever? That's a little bit harder for us, providing you this to make that choice. And so the default is wait, which is data safe, or at least application safe, because some applications don't handle EIOs very well. And so when you're troubleshooting these things, you may hit that situation where suddenly everything stops as we're waiting forever. So be aware that there's a fail mode property that you might want to adjust for that case. You may want to do continue or not. That's an Update 6.
If everything does stop like that, is there an easy way to detect that that's what's happening?
Is there an easy way to detect that? The answer is probably. What will happen is if you do like a ZFS status or a Z pool status, then the Z pool status will hang. Okay, so let's work our way through the troubleshooting guide here, right? Okay, so I have a problem and my IO seems to stop. So what's the status of the Z pool? Z pool status hangs. This is the result of a bug which was fixed in build 100 or 101. 99, 100, 101, somewhere in the last month or 2, that Z pool status can hang. Okay, which is a nasty bug because it immediately stops your troubleshooting.
That's an interesting point. Like when you get a bug like that, under what circumstances will Sun port that bug back or the bug fix back into Solaris?
That particular one is fairly nasty. And I don't know the policies about what they will pick up the port back. I will say it is most likely not in Solaris 10. I'd have to double check the patch code. Cindy, could you make a note of that? We'll do the Z-pool status hanging bug, and we'll track down what its status is and whether it's on the backport list. Because that's a particularly irritating one when you're simulating failures or experiencing failures like that. So that's a gotcha. The other things you should see also in the FMA messages, you should also have an FMA message that tells you that we're having an I/O issue. Okay, so what I want you to take away from that is that FMA is your friend, and in the old days when you would comb through the var/adm messages file, or look at your syslogs on another host or whatnot, you should start to get in the habit of doing an FM faulty or FM dump, which will tell you the fault management status of all the fault management if they've found a fault. Or you can get error dumps. There's actually a whole bunch of data that you can dump out of that through FMA to see correlated faults. I might have an FMA presentation around somewhere if we want to get into it later. If not, certainly you can hit me up any time, and I'll talk a little bit in more detail why FMA is so good for us. So, question?
Yeah, so the overall hardware question probably goes beyond ZFS somewhat, but say that I just figure out VA or V440. The hardware is happily hot pluggable, but it's large level. Why do you do all this Lux ADM, CFD ADM nonsense? Does any of that going to go away?
Excellent question here. That's a fantastic question, because it's a pain in the butt. There's another property that you can deal with, and this is, Cindy, this is at the Z-pool, right? The auto replace?